Before we get into season 2 of Desperate Housewives, I need to fill in a couple of blanks from season 1. Remember the lady Maisie Gibbons that was playing S&M with Rex on the side? She ended up getting arrested for prostitution and her little black book came out. Being that Rex's name was in there more than a couple of times, Bree no longer felt comfortable at the country club. She canceled their membership just in time to be able to loan Gabby and Carlos money to fix their sewage system. Carlos was out on bail, but he was unable to make money for the house because he was under house arrest. Eventually, Gabby got tired of working and decided to depend on John the gardener. Even though he's 18 now and he's got a lawn mowing business going, his credit card didn't go very far. Mama Solis woke up from her coma but fell down the steps in the hospital. The hospital offered Gabby a settlement check and she accepted it without Carlos's permission. But in order to keep the money, Carlos had to take a plea deal and go to prison for a couple of months. Leading up to his prison sentence, Carlos decided to solidify Gabby's loyalty. He'd ordered some of her birth control in advance and tampered with it in order to get her pregnant. Only too bad for him, she had also been sleeping with John the gardener unprotected. Gabby, being petty, let Carlos know that the baby might not be his. And once again in his rage, he ended up beating up another gay man. Charges were pressed, but that wasn't the end of Carlos's anger because John entered the courtroom and let him know he beat up the wrong guy. Lynette found out that Tom neglected to tell her that he was working with his ex-girlfriend. Intimidated by her attractiveness and Tom's sudden disinterest in her, Lynette decided to get her a job somewhere else. Only once she received the offer, in order to keep her at that job, Tom's supervisor gave her the vice president job. Tom, being in the dark the entire time, felt offended and took it out on his boss. After losing his job, Tom decided that it was time for Lynette to go back to work for a while. Bree and Rex decided to try and work it out in their marriage, and she did her best to fulfill his S&M fantasies. But her dates with George Williams, even as friends, led him to believe that there was some hope between the two of them. George began tampering with Rex's heart medication, which caused him to get sick. He also broke in their house and snooped around and found a box full of toys. Once he told Bree at the grocery store that Rex had been going around the hospital talking about their personal life, Bree had finally decided that she was giving up on their marriage. When she confronted Rex, he had a heart attack, and instead of rushing to his aid, she took her time and made the bed. She admitted Rex to the hospital and made amends with him, but the day before he was to have the surgery, he had a heart attack and died. Not before the doctor had let him know that someone had been sabotaging his health. Unfortunately, he passed away thinking that it was Bree. He left a note saying that he forgave her, but his mother is on a warpath during this funeral planning. We find out that Mary Alice Young used to be Angela, and she used to live in Utah with her husband Paul. She was unable to have children, and she worked at a rehab facility. One of her patients, Deirdre, who just so happened to be Mike's ex-girlfriend, visited her and Paul one night begging for money. When they refused to give her money for her habit, she traded her baby instead. Mary Alice and Paul accepted the baby, but unfortunately, Deirdre OD'd shortly after that. When she was rushed to the hospital, Mary Alice found out that they were desperately searching for her 10-month-old baby. That's when Mary Alice and Paul decided to take the baby Dana, who they decided to name Zach, and flee to Fairview and ended up living on Wisteria Lane. 3 years later, Deirdre was clean, she tracked them down and demanded her baby back. Deirdre began attacking Paul with the fireplace poker, and Mary Alice panicked and poked her in the stomach. She passed away in their living room floor, and they stuffed her in the wooden toy box. They buried her beneath the pool, and the next day the workers poured the cement. They thought their secret was safe forever, but someone on Wisteria Lane had connections to someone out in Utah who worked with Angela, or Mary Alice Young. When Martha Hoover was visiting her sister Felicia Tillman in Utah, she noticed a picture of her with Mary Alice Young at the hospital. When she questioned her, Felicia Tillman explained who she was and told her the story about the baby. Felicia had thought that it was just a coincidence that Angela and Paul left around the same time the baby disappeared. But Martha pieced it all together, and being that she was financially struggling after her husband's passing, she decided to use that information to extort that money from the Youngs. Only Mary Alice decided to die with her secret instead. After finally finding out most of the truth about how Deirdre passed on, Mike decided to avenge her by kidnapping Paul Young and deleting him from the planet. But once he learned that Mary Alice was the one who hurt Deirdre and that Zach is probably his son, he changed his mind. Only it was too late because Zach had Susan held up in his house waiting for him. Susan wrestled the weapon from Zach and he took off into the night.